Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning in Vancouver, and good evening in Israel. My name is Karen Mock, and I am honored to be president of JSpace Canada, for at least a few more hours anyway. It is my great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the board of JSpace Canada to our first virtual conference and our fifth biennial conference. And if you do the math, fifth biennial times 2 to our 10th anniversary celebration, so aptly titled, A New Decade, celebrating 10 years of JSpace Canada. We have a full day with our symposium, the AGM and gala celebration. And of course, we all miss gathering in person from coast to coast for what has become our signature event, strengthening our relationships and our voices, and interacting with national and international leaders in our movement. But looking at the bright side, and I always have to, we don't have to brave the snowstorms, and we can enjoy a dynamic panel from Israel with no travel costs. Before we jump into our exciting symposium with our outstanding panel, it has become our custom in Canada to begin events with Indigenous land acknowledgement. But I also feel it's important to acknowledge why we do it. Acknowledging territory shows recognition of and respect for Aboriginal peoples. It is a recognition of their presence both in the past and the present. Recognition and respect are essential elements of establishing healthy, reciprocal relations. These relationships are key to reconciliation, a process to which JSpace Canada is committed. We have board members from Montreal, Thornhill, Ottawa, Kitchener, Hamilton, Vancouver, and they are all on traditional and many unceded territories. But I am speaking to you from Toronto, which is covered by Treaty 13 signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Toronto is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And similar to the rest of Canada, is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Land acknowledgement is a small but important step in the process of reconciliation and building positive relationships with Indigenous peoples. It is also a reminder that we are all accountable to these relationships. It involves thinking about what happened in the past and what changes can be made going forward in order to further the reconciliation process and strengthening relationships. These are strong parallels to the work of JSpace Canada. A new decade, celebrating 10 years of JSpace Canada, celebrating the past, but more importantly, passing the torch of leadership to the next generations to secure the future. And I can attest to the fact that our future is in good hands. It is primarily our new leadership who have worked so hard during very difficult COVID circumstances to bring this exciting program to you. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the chair of our fifth biennial conference, Robin Fishbane. Robin describes herself as a passionately progressive Jewish politico, and I can attest to that description. It has been a pleasure to work with Robin during her first year as a member of the JSpace Canada board. Robin has spent much of her adult life either working or volunteering in the Jewish community or in the political sphere. Robin is a recent graduate of Carleton's Master of Political Management program, and she currently works at Queen's Park as a legislative assistant to an MPP. Previously, Robin worked at CJPAC, helping engage members of the Jewish community in the political process. She received her Bachelor's of Arts degree in sociology at McMaster University, where she was actively involved in her campus Hillel executive. This is the first JSpace event that Robin has chaired, and she has done a stellar job. Robin, Mazel Tov and Yasher Koach. Unmute, and the floor, or should I say the screen, is yours.
Thank you, Karen, for the warm introduction. I first want to thank you, as well as the rest of our planning committee, namely David Grosskind, Francine Dick, David Burson, Georgia Gardner, and Jordan Devon for all the work you've done and the guidance you provided to make today's 10th anniversary celebration a reality. Your dedication to JSpace does not go unnoticed. I also want to let all attendees know that if you do have a question for our speakers that you have not already submitted for our Q&A, there is still time to submit your questions using the Q&A function. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Judy Maltz. Born in New York and educated at Barnard College, Judy has worked as a journalist in Israel for many years and was a senior lecturer in journalism at Penn State University in Pennsylvania. In addition to Haaretz, where she founded the English language print edition and currently writes features about Israeli society, Judy has written for the Financial Times, Reuters, the Jerusalem Post, Jerusalem Report, and Globes. In addition to her journalism, Judy is an award-winning documentary filmmaker. Her film, Number 4 Street of Our Lady, about a Polish Catholic woman who saved 16 Jews during the Holocaust, has won multiple awards at international film festivals. It is a privilege to have Judy with us to facilitate today's symposium. Without further ado, let's welcome her and our panelists to the screen.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Hello, everybody. Greetings from Tel Aviv. It's already night here. I'd like to start with Itai Flesher. Itai, let me introduce him, is the Education Director at Kids for Peace, Jerusalem, an interfaith youth movement that brings together children from East and West Jerusalem to promote the values of inclusion, justice, and equality for all. Born in Israel, Itai moved to Australia as a child and worked there as a high school teacher, specializing in formal and informal Jewish education for 15 years. I should add that he's also a friend and a colleague because Itai is also a journalist and he writes for 61J, which is a progressive Jewish publication in Australia, and I love reading his work. So hello, Itai. I want to start with this question. Your offices are based in the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah. Over the past year, I would say, that has become the flashpoint in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The situation there is pretty complicated, but if I were to put it simply, what we have there are several dozen Palestinian families who have been fighting attempts by right-wing Jewish settler organizations to evict them from their homes. It was the protests in Sheikh Jarrah that triggered violent clashes between Jews and Arabs in mixed cities across the country last May, as well as the latest round of fighting between Israel and Hamas. So my question to you is, what is it like running a movement dedicated to peace, justice, and equality in one of the most volatile places on earth these days?
What a question to start with. So, look, I've been working in Kids for Peace in Sheikh Jarrah. We've had 2 offices in the neighborhood for 3.5 years. And I can still tell, you know, my first day when I came there for my job interview, I was terrified because I'd never been to Sheikh. It wasn't as bad then as it is now, but I was just told Jews don't go to East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is dangerous. One of my cousins told me you'll get stabbed if you go there. I had all of these associations of East Jerusalem just not being a place where I belong, and also I didn't know any Arabic back then. I didn't know any people who lived there back then. I was, just a total outsider. And I even remember when we had our programs in Sheikh, they're actually now in Beit Shmuel, but Jewish parents saying, "Oh, I don't know if my kid should come there. Can you meet them at the light rail and walk them down to where the program is?" Because there was a sense of fear, and I always thought that fear was one way. And then I started meeting the Palestinian kids, the Palestinian staff, and I said, hypothetically, if we had our programs in, I don't know, Baka, Katamon, one of the Jewish neighborhoods in West Jerusalem, would you come? And they go, "Oh no, we feel really unsafe in those neighborhoods." And I go, "Why?" And they go, "Oh, because every time you speak Arabic in West Jerusalem, you get stopped by police. They ask you for ID cards. People look at you funny. People think, what are you doing?" Especially for boys, not so much for girls. And it sort of occurred to me how much Jerusalem is not a united city, in the sense of it's really got three almost like ghettos. There's a Haredi ghetto of, Har Nof, Geula, Mea Shearim, the secular area of Baka, Katamon, Talpiot, Arnona, and then East Jerusalem, which is the largest part of Jerusalem, which is 40% of the city. Sheikh Jarrah specifically is a neighborhood that it's almost like the Rehavia of the East Jerusalem. It's a middle class neighborhood. It's a neighborhood with a lot of history. The Husseinis live there. The Nashashibis live there. There's a lot of enormous houses, a lot of embassies and consulates. I'd imagine that if there's ever a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem, it would probably sit in Sheikh Jarrah, just because it seems like the neighborhood where you would have, diplomats and that sort of thing. And, just this week, the Salahia home, which is opposite the British consulate in Sheikh Jarrah, it's 3 doors down from our office. There's a nursery that I walk past to work every day that was demolished so that the municipality could build a school for special needs children. And I just look at this and I'm horrified, thinking, of course we need more schools in East Jerusalem, but why there? Why remove someone from their home? Yes, they built their house on so-called municipal territory, but when they bought their house, it was part of Jordan. So why? I feel like Sheikh Jarrah has so much potential to be a place of leadership, of vision, and I just feel like we constantly just make decisions there that hurt people and that hurt my friends who live in the neighborhood, including people that I work with, and it's heartbreaking. So to come to my work to run a peace organization there is very conflicted, because a lot of people, when they think of Sheikh Jarrah, the last thing they think of is Israeli and Palestinian teenagers coming every day to work, to meet, to talk to each other, to share about their school, their parents, their hopes, their dreams, their fears. But then, where else do you make peace if not the place where there's the greatest conflict? That to me, it's easy to make peace in some symposium in California or, something like that. But I feel like Sheikh Jarrah's the place where you need a peace organization the most. So with all the challenges, and I haven't even mentioned Corona yet, I feel like it's the right place for us to be, and I feel very grateful that I can work there and do what I do, and it gives me a lot of meaning, especially as an Oleh that is very pained by what goes on in Jerusalem, to be a part of something that I see as giving hope for a better future here.
Now, back in May, many Israelis and Palestinians involved in shared society and cross-border initiatives like yourself were feeling extremely disillusioned, and many were asking themselves whether all their work was in vain. What were your feelings at the time, and has it made you think about whether something needs to be changed in initiatives based on the people-to-people model?
Look, I don't think anyone who works in a peace organization hasn't had days where they don't wake up and think, what am I doing? This is such a waste of time. This is so difficult. This is so painful. We're a drop in the ocean. And I have those days too. And in May, I had it for a month and we didn't even operate for 6 weeks just because it was so unsafe to leave the home for our kids, and also for me as a parent, concerned about my own kids' safety at that time, because everything that went on in Jerusalem, all the lynchings and stabbings and car rammings, and people just looking to attack someone from the other side because of the language that they spoke in the street. And an analogy that I always use, that I actually heard from Aziz Abu Sarah, who once ran for mayor of Jerusalem as a friend of mine, he gives the analogy of a house on fire, which is sometimes how I describe Jerusalem, as a house on fire. And he says three people walk past it. The first person walks past the house on fire and says, "Oh, a house on fire, I should run away. That looks really dangerous. I don't have anything to do with a house on fire because I might get burned." The second person looks at the house on fire and says, "Let's set up a committee of all the experts in firefighting and technology and people that really know a lot about how to put out flames, and have a big, long discussion about what we should do about this fire. And then after a couple of years, we'll decide how to act." And then the third person just gets a bucket and starts throwing water on the fire. And I feel like what we do at Kids for Peace is just a bucket. We're not going to end the occupation. We're not going to stop the violence that exists in the city, the justice, the inequality. And if I said I could, I'd be lying. We're not that big. But what we do is it's a very small action. It's just like a bucket of water that says, for these kids, for the 80 or 100 kids that come to our programs every week, we're showing them that there's a different way that's possible. And in order to make peace, you have to show people that peace is possible, that you do have a partner on the other side, that you have someone that wants to talk to you, someone that will commiserate with your pain and share your sufferings and your joys and your hopes and your birthday and your festivals and all of those sorts of things. And that's what we're doing. It's a small bucket of water for the kids that are part of our movement to say another way is possible. Yesh derech acheret, and that is how you start to put out that fire. So yes, I do feel days where I'm sort of frustrated and anguished, and for so many reasons that the change we want to see happen hasn't happened yet. But I feel like I can't give up, because to live here means to struggle, and to struggle for me means to work for a Jerusalem that will eventually be just and equal for everyone.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce our next panelist, Dr. Jamal Dagas. He's a Palestinian Israeli citizen and a family and palliative care physician residing in Haifa. Since 2010, Jamal has worked as the director of home-based hospice services for Clalit HMO in Haifa and the north of Israel, providing supportive care for terminally ill patients and their families. Dr. Daghash is an activist involved in various projects to build a shared future for all the communities in this country, and he is one of the founders of Haifa for All of Us, a grassroots community which was established in the aftermath of the violent events of May, which we just discussed. Since 2005, he has been involved with the Mastery Foundation in Israel, a US-based nonprofit which empowers grassroots community leaders. Welcome, Jamal. Great to see you again. I'd like to start by asking you, I want to hear more about Haifa for All of Us. What is the mission of this movement? And did your personal perceptions about Arab-Jewish relations in this country change after the events of last May?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me, for inviting me. I'm so excited, first of all, to speak with you in English. This is my fourth language. So after Arabic, Hebrew, and Russian, so speaking in English is a challenge, and I hope that you can get my message clearly about what I'm going to speak with you. And I'm going to use my own experience. I grew up in a mixed city in Akko when I was a kid, and I lived next to Jewish neighbors. And then later, when I became a doctor and worked as a general practitioner, I lived in a Jewish community in the south, around Beersheba. So I have very kind of a decent experience of knowing the other, living the other's life. And at the same time, coming back to Haifa, coming back to the north where I belong, where I was born in the Galilee, the deep sense of isolation, and being not part of the biggest, biggest community of the biggest society of Israel, being separated and not being able to express the deep concerns was motivating me to act and to be committed to a shared society in Israel for Jews and Palestinians. So I knew that I was treated very well, by Jewish community when I work as a doctor. I am a privilege, but at the same time, I noticed my other people who are not the same situation like me were not experiencing the same being part of this society of Israel. So coming back to Haifa and meeting Maha in 2003, I became very much aware how much we are, as Palestinians, we are not part. And I chose not to be victim and to be complaining. So I knew that there's something to be done here in this country. And in 2005, Maha and me, we joined an initiative that a group of Palestinian and Jews started in creating an alternative to the Independence Day, which is some place where people, Palestinians and Jews, can come together and share their aspirations, their fears, their concerns, their history, their narrative. So we were part of that initiative, which is still working. It's on a non-profit. It's even voluntary, a group of people running the annual event. And still it's 18 years since that time is going and inviting people to a special kind of meeting and being together. So this is one of the things that I feel it's natural for me to express my commitment for a shared society here. And at the same time, when I came to Haifa in 2013, we joined the hand-in-hand organization to build and establish a school, bilingual school in Haifa. It's ridiculous that Haifa is a shared city. It's a mixed city, but no shared or not a educational system. No one Arab Jewish school in Haifa. So you can imagine it's so separated. We are educated separately. We are living different lives, even if we are living in Haifa. So for me, being in Haifa and noticing what's happening here, and the layers, under being nice to each other and living together and eating together and maybe meeting together in cafe, but still a feeling of strangers are living in this city. So in May 2021, when the violent actions erupted in Haifa, I was not surprised. I knew that it's coming because these young people that are coming, they are very aware of their identity. They want to belong to Haifa. They want a space where they can express their anger, their feelings about what's happening in Gaza. And they were treated violently by the police, by other people who didn't agree, they didn't accept. They are feeling different from them. They are willing to see something else here. So when I came back and met other people, grassroots leaders in Haifa, we started this shared, Haifa for all. And let me tell you about that. It's something that is not belonging to any party. It's political. We want Haifa a secure, safe place, welcoming, inclusive place for everybody. And we noticed that no party, no political party did the work in order to ensure and to bring and to make Haifa. Not the municipality, no any party did that work. It's our work. The community work. So we have to, we started off, let's take ourselves from the comfort zone of our lives and to be engaged and to be doing the work that nobody is willing to do that. I mean, it's something that really it's important that the community is engaged, is involved, contributing their time, their good to create such a place. So we are not coming with solutions how to do it that. We are coming with much more questions what to do, how to do that. So we are creating a platform, a space where people can come together, people from different places, it doesn't mean you have to be leftist or liberal. It could you be right wing if you are accept the vision of Haifa for all. So you are welcome. Let's talk how we can do it. And this is the beginning of something. And I noticed that Itai was saying we can't bring, but we are planting something that at some point, someday, it will grow up and make the difference in bringing a shared society and in not only in Haifa, I mean in this country and in this region.
Yeah, regarding Haifa for all of us, so I just want to ask you, how many people are involved right now?
Right now,
yeah, and also as far as you know, is it does it exist anywhere else in the country? Something like this?
Actually, I have to say that it started from a bigger initiative to create a joint Arab-Jewish party that will run to the Knesset.
Mm.
We wanted that. And at the same time, we started with something that, let's start with the local level with Haifa. I'm not sure that in other places there are a community, but I will be happy to see other people starting to do that, to initiate that initiative. I mean, that kind of work in Jaffa or in other mixed cities. We need that. We have now the luxury to let others do the work for us. So we need to find the way, the time, and the energy to do that work. And it's not easy, and at the same time, it's a pleasure to meet the good in other people. It's next to you. Just look and see it. And I believe if we can gather that good in each of us, we can create here that future that we are dreaming of, shared society.
Do you think you might, in the upcoming municipal elections, turn it into a party and actually run?
No, we already talked. We want to be a platform to support people who believe in that program that is Haifa is a home for everybody, for Arabs and Jews, for Haredim, for religious and secular, for men and women. People who are believing and they support that program, that vision, we will support them. We are, I have no energy to run to the municipality. I would love to see other young people going and doing that work.
Now, you're a doctor, and I'm sure you have daily contact with Jewish Israelis, both as your patients and your colleagues. And it's often said that the healthcare system in Israel is one of the few areas where Jews and Arabs actually meet each other and interact. And I think that has become especially pronounced over the past 2 years during the pandemic and the joint effort everyone seems to be making to take control of this. What I wanted to ask you is whether things are actually that rosy when you're inside the system. In other words, is the healthcare system really the model of coexistence and shared society it's cracked up to be?
It's not the model. It's very superficial. I mean, really, the medical system and the healthcare system in Israel is one of the best, and it's accessible for everybody, for Arabs and Jews. The life expectancy of Arabs and Jews is high. I mean, there is still differences, but it's high enough in the world. And really, I'm proud that I'm working in this health care system. At the same time, we know it's not enough deep to to show or to bring forward the potential of fully bringing each side themselves. I think what unites us is the care of others, listening the suffering of others. It's a big commitment that, like, bringing us together to put hand in hand and to do the work and to trust each other and to love each other and to appreciate each other and to see. At the same time, I have to tell you, we are still living different lives, different futures, different aspirations. We are living in different places. Our kids are educated in different educational system. In schools, they are not treated this, not getting the same values. So it's still, we are strange to each other. We are not enough together. I mean, I am not enough bringing ourselves. At the Day of Independence, my experience that Arab medical people are looking for a place where to hide themselves in order not to be seen, not standing or not during the siren.
Mhm.
So we are not living the same happiness or the same joy that the other is living, the independence. We are experiencing the pain of not being seen with our feelings regarding the Nakba. So a lot of things we are not sharing together. We are avoiding. You like, don't touch me and I will not touch your concerns.
Doesn't come up for discussion, the conflict in your daily interactions with other doctors, nurses?
It's not the common, no. And the new fund of Israel is promoting a new initiative to have a new space that Arab and Jewish medical staff can speak together about how being different from different identity, with different identity, working together. I think it will be very interesting. This is the first time that I will be joining such a interesting space where we can open up places that are maybe we are not so willing to open when are together.
It sounds fascinating. And I have one more question for you. For the first time ever, there is an Arab party, Ra'am, which is the Islamist party, that is part of the governing coalition in Israel. And many Israelis think that is a very big deal. I'm wondering, do you as well?
Oh, Judy, first of all, you could assume that I am stand that Arab Palestinians in Israel are taking part in the governing of this country, taking part in making decision in every area, not financial only. So I'm happy that the paradigm was broken by this act. At the same time, we have a lot of critics about the way it was done, the way it is introduced. It's not my choice to see people who are not standing for the values that I'm standing, are taking care and doing the decisions. The Ram is a party based on Islamic values or movement. And their values toward women and the LGBT community, they are not my values. So I'm not choosing them to be the people who are partners with the Jewish government and the Jewish government to be representing me. At the same time, there is some kind of, okay, let's wait and see, maybe this new space will bring forward something that we want, maybe a shared party, Jewish Arab party that can really represent our values, that will be in the Knesset, and it could be at least 30 members. This is the potential of our coalition, our being together, that we really can impact bigger than the Ram what is doing. So I'm at the same time, there is a kind of willing to give it a chance to see what's going. At the same time, the way and the decisions they did until now, they are not making me happy.
I see. Well, I'd like to now take the opportunity to introduce our next panelist, who happens to be your wife. And I think she's sitting in another room in the same house, right? Dr. Maha El-Taji is a Palestinian residing in Haifa, Israel. She completed her interdisciplinary PhD in Near and Middle East Studies at the University of Washington in 2008 and received a postdoctoral fellowship at Hebrew U's Political Science Department in 2009-2010. She is an adjunct lecturer at Haifa University's International School and an independent academic researcher. Her current research with the Van Leer Institute of Jerusalem is on the topic of the socio-economic mobility of the Palestinian citizens of Israel. Maha is a certified compassionate listening facilitator and has co-led compassionate listening trips to Israel-Palestine between 2005 and 2009. And since 2005, she has been involved with the Mastery Foundation in Israel, a US-based nonprofit, which empowers grassroots community leaders. So hello, Maha.
Hi, Judy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. So first of all, I'd love to hear more about your research at the Van Leer Institute. What have you discovered about the socio-economic mobility of Palestinian citizens? And another thing I'd like to ask you is, it seems that more and more Arab women are pursuing higher education, perhaps even in greater numbers than Arab men today. And I was wondering what effect, if any, is that having on the socio-economic mobility of Palestinian citizens?
Okay, so this research, first of all, I have, like you, in your introduction, you can see I have two hats, the academic hat and the compassionate listening, activism, empowerment of leadership hat. And they've been a dance in my life all along, all the time that I've been living in Israel. So when I came to working on this project, it was me trying to understand more from an academic point of view what's happening. Because when I'm too focused on other activism, I sometimes get out of touch with what's actually happening on the ground. And this has been a 2.5-year research project. I'm part of a team, so I can talk about the work that I've been doing, but the work is in the framework of the Van Leer Institute in Jerusalem. It's funded by Rosa Luxemburg, which is a German fund. And my part focuses on the government resolution 922 and how it was used, but I'm focused also on housing and industrial areas.
Government Resolution 922, just to specify, this is the big budgets that were allocated for?
Passed in 2015 for 5 years and then extended because of the corona for another year. So between 2015 and 2021, that money, the 9.7 billion, which was supposed to be a huge amount of money. Okay, it's controversial how huge it is, but it was much bigger than previous budgets allocated for certain areas. In the context of no disagreement that there is huge discrimination of the Palestinian citizens of Israel, and that this budget is going to help move things forward for informal education, for housing, there was not much really for industrial areas, which was an issue, and some other areas that transportation, other projects. My focus was on the housing and industrial areas, and I focused on that because it had to do with land, the crux of the issues inside Israel and outside Israel, of course, but at least my focus here was on inside Israel. And what I found in my research, so all this, just to take a step back, all this research was about the mobility, socioeconomic mobility, was in the context, of the political situation. In 2018, the nation state law was passed. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, you're looking at the government saying, here's some money, we have money for you to grow and and get better and integrate and contribute economically to the growth in Israel. On the other hand, we are having all of this happen under this threat of, if you lift your political head above a certain level, you're going to get it. Limit yourself. And so this is the context that this research was working in. On the one hand, we had, as Palestinians, Palestinian citizens of Israel, had to bifurcate our way of looking at things. On the one hand, we do want to evolve economically, but on the other hand, we're working through all of this within the political system that limits us. So my main findings was that it wasn't about money, that really what it is about is the structural constraints, that money is there and money is not, it's underutilized because of the structural constraints. And the structural constraints are tied directly to what happened in 1948, the fact that the villages, the Arab villages that became part of Israel, they had their boundaries strictly drawn around them. They couldn't grow, and the control is in the hands of the Jewish power. And so that really was the main thing. And here in the case of housing, for example, the main problem was the bureaucracy, which the Israeli bureaucracy, which was heavily geared and heavily slanted towards serving the Jewish population rather than the Arab population. If you want to plan a new neighborhood in an Arab location, in an Arab town or a city, the planning of it could take more than 2 decades as compared to 7 years in a Jewish area. There have been no new Palestinian areas. There's been only Jewish areas, new Jewish areas. The Jewish areas are limited to the Jews and not to the Arabs. And when Arabs started exploding out of their villages, and those who can afford started moving to Carmiel and Natseret Alit, which is now called Nof HaGalil, and moving to other places like Atlit, they are not really wanted there. So that's basically the main research. But really, this whole thing of going back to the origins of it it's very interesting that my path with activism, where we accepting the realpolitik of the situation, that the state of Israel is here to stay as it is, as a Jewish state. And what is left for us to look at is what can we do with that? We live within those constraints. And we find us as citizens of Israel still living within those constraints and not really questioning them. And I'm also seeing that in activism, the whole idea of this Jewish state is also not being questioned. And it's almost like the elephant in the room. And so my academic research and my activism are kind of going hand in hand. And we cannot not deal with this big elephant in the room anymore. It's time to talk about it. It's not going to be enough to pour money into Palestinian citizens. We have to look more at the structural powers that are entrenching the superiority of Jews over the Arab citizens.
Mm-hmm. Now, I asked Itai before this question, but I would love to hear your view as well. Over the past 20 to 30 years, there have been so many attempts to resolve the conflict through people-to-people encounters. But that didn't prevent the violence that ripped through the country in May. Do you think there's something wrong with the models we've been using?
I don't know if I can't say it's the model of people-to-people. I mean, if the purpose of the people-to-people is to solve the conflict, then yes, I would say, I mean, that's not going to happen. But I would not minimize the people-to-people programs. My whole path has gone through the people-to-people programs. It's a process. And sometimes the research that you see out there minimizing the people-to-people programs doesn't really take into consideration how much the seeds are planted and how long it takes for them to grow and how much this is a process. So I would not underestimate the power of people-to-people program, but there is no way on earth that they are going to solve the problem without having governments, having NGOs, having civil society, having the media, which plays a big part in keeping things as they are, especially here in Israel. There is so much more needed than the people-to-people programs. We need much more water to float that peace boat. Yeah, but I love that they are heart openers. They fill us, the people-to-people programs, when they can happen. And when they do happen, unfortunately, a lot of times they happen in Area C, or people cannot come here if they're Palestinians. And dialogue can only go so far within this power structure that is obviously has somebody saying you can come and go, and here's where you can meet, and here's where you don't meet, and here are the topics that are taboo. We will talk about this, but we won't talk about other things. In some programs. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. I'd like to introduce our last panelist, last but not least, Tom Kettner. He's 23 years old and studying law and international relations at the Hebrew University. For the past 18 years, he's been working as an organizer at Peace Now, and he says he is motivated by his strong belief in the importance of the two-state solution to the lives of both Israelis and Palestinians between the river and the sea. So welcome, Tom, and thanks for coming on such short notice, because we were supposed to have Donna here, but she lost her voice, and we are very, very grateful to you for agreeing to fill in at such short notice. Tom, it is often said that the settlements are one of the key obstacles to a final peace settlement, and there's no better source on how much settlement activity is growing than Peace Now, your organization. From what you've been able to determine at Peace Now, has settlement activity expanded under this new so-called change government?
Well, first of all, thanks, Judy. It's a real pleasure being here. And I think it's yet a difficult question to answer, because we always need to remember that this government is quite fresh. It's a new government with a wide variety of parties from wide variety of ideologies all over the map after 12 years of right-wing the Netanyahu regime, which was 12 long years. Everything that happened kind of happened under the radar. No new settlements were declared at the government table other than the replacement for Amona, which was an illegal outpost that was evacuated in 2017. But the same thing is actually happening in this government right now. Though no bulldozers are running over any settlements, and though we're not getting much closer to a deal with the Palestinian Authority, the government, on the other hand, overlooks the approval of more than 1,600 housing units planned for the West Bank, which are planned to also expand the area of most small settlements and create a way bigger sphere of control of Jewish land in the occupied territories. And more than that, the government actually overlooks the establishment of new illegal posts. Let's look at Eviatar, for example. Eviatar is an outpost that has been evacuated more than 20 or 30 times, and yet every day the settlers go back. And every time the settlers go back, the army and the military and the government in Israel grows a bit tired of them, and they just decide to stop worrying about them and just starting to guard them. And while doing that, they let the extreme right wing, the politicians, set facts in the ground. And that's what we need to fight right now. But as long as we don't let this government kind of play itself out, I don't think we'll have a clear answer to whether we have an improvement or a worsening of the situation coming ahead.
Mm-hmm. So if this government lasts long enough for Yair Lapid to take over, and he, of course, is from the more centrist Yesh Atid party, as opposed to current Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who actually grew up in the settler movement and is much more right wing. So if it lasts long enough, do you think it will have more of an inclination to embark on peace talks and contain settlement activity, act against settler violence?
Well, the first thing we need to remember is that we can't forget that the former head of the Settler Council in the West Bank and Gaza is going to be, now he's the #1 person in Israel, he's just going to be #2, and he's going to have way more influences if he's going to actually go through the rotation and let Yair Lapid be the prime minister as promised. But he's going to have way more power then, because he wouldn't have that much of an obligation to the government because he already spent his 2 years in the chair. So he can just maybe break everything up. But if we'll go to the perspective in which you don't need to worry about that, I mean, what we can do in the remaining 18 months of the Bennett administration, as long as we're going to push hard enough and show the members of our parliament, the member of the government, that the evacuation of the illegal outposts is more than crucial, that all the violence that goes out of these specific violent outposts is actually endangering not only Israeli and Palestinian lives, and also abolishes human rights all over the West Bank, it also brings us further and further away from actual chances to peace with the Palestinians. I can also share with you that last week when the Salhia family in Sheikh Jarrah were evacuated from their home, I was right there with them during the evacuation. And I remember one of the last things I talked to the wife of the owner, Mahmoud, so Lital, told me that she doesn't even want to think about what's going to happen if they're going to kick them out of their home, because it just brings us one step further away to escalation. I mean, her kids now definitely don't love us as Israelis and Jews due to the evacuation of them and many other families that the settlers there actually try to kick out of their homes just for the sake of ideology and supreme Judaism. So we need to look at it like in a bigger sphere. If we're going to look at the outposts alone, at the settlements alone, we're going to get only half a picture. I mean, of course, we need to work hard and long in order to get the ministers to see how bad it is when they are dealing with the outposts and avoiding evacuating them, because every day that happens, another terror attack goes against Palestinians, and that most likely, every time it brings action back from the Palestinian side, it gets us into a very, very violent circle, which we won't be able to see ourselves getting out of. And when we look into Jerusalem, what we need to do most now is to put pressure on the government to see that even if it's done within where most of the Israeli people don't see the land is occupied because it's annexed, it doesn't mean that Israel can do whatever it wants in its kind of Palestinian backyard in the capital.
Thank you so much, Tom. We're running out of time, and I'd like to get some questions from our listeners in. So here's a question for both Maha and Jamal. I don't know if you decide among yourselves who you want to answer this. Do you identify as Israeli beyond citizenship? Do you feel a civil attachment to the state of Israel? Or do you choose not to engage or identify with the government? Why or why not?
I would say we can both answer this.
Okay.
Just the fact that we're married doesn't mean we have different answers.
Okay, good. It will be actually interesting if you disagree on this.
I don't know, actually. This is an interesting question. I would say I'm an Israeli citizen. I cannot say that I'm Israeli, considering everything that's been going on here. But I also, like Jamal, want to be engaged. I want to have equality. I want to have a different Israel. I'm also very practical and very understanding, not justifying what happened in 1948, but understanding that there are people who've made it home here, but not at the expense of other people, that there are ways to deal with what has happened in the past, and that it's time to start talking about restorative justice and opening up some discussions about what it means to have an Israeli state. But right now, to say that I feel Israeli, it's really difficult. You know, the flag is not my flag. The anthem is not my anthem. I open the TV and it's not me. There's nothing on television that's me. You know, and I hear the news, how they talk about me and my people. So that's really very, you know, can I just add one thing that's not in your question, but is in what Jamal had said. He wasn't surprised about what happened here in May, and I wasn't surprised. But the thing is that Israeli Jews, the majority of them, are surprised by these when these things happen, because what they don't really get is that we are part of a people that belongs from the Palestinian diaspora all the way to the West Bank, all the way to Gaza, all the way to the Negev, all the way to the everywhere. We are, you know, we identify with that much more than we identify with what's happening with the, you know, under the Israeli oppression. So unless the dynamics of power change, that's going to be very difficult to feel a belonging here.
Mhm.
The only thing that I would like to add to what Maha, I agree with all what she said, but I am not accepting even the Israeli identity that it will be the future shared identity for me, because all the history and the symbols, we need to create a shared identity here for all us. And it means taking, I don't know exactly how it looks like, but I can't agree on in this level of Israeli identity, because some people I'm hearing the Israeli identity is enough inclusive. No, it's not enough inclusive. It's too exclusive, including the name Israel. It's not mine. So if you want to be part and to feel engaged and belong, so let's talk about that.
So you would want to change the name of the country and change the flag and
maybe
symbols.
Whatever. I'm not imposing, but I want to keep what you respect, and let's add what I respect.
Okay. Here's another question. It's not addressed to anyone in particular. So Itai, I think maybe we'll give you a shot at it. This person says, for those of us working for a truly shared society, one of the most difficult obstacles is the anti-normalization pressure, especially on Palestinians and especially in the diaspora. What can you suggest to overcome this barrier that poses real danger for Palestinians?
So I'll say two things. One of the most powerful things we've done at Kids for Peace is we once took a group of kids to Belfast, and we sat with Protestant and Catholic leaders who, as you know, through the Troubles, killed each other, suicide bombings, shootings, attacks in bars, pubs, policemen, all those sorts of things. And we said, how did you come to you know, sit in the same parliament installment now after all of this trouble? And they said, the first thing we did was build relationships, 2 people at a time. You know, one Catholic priest, a Protestant bishop, you know, different religious leaders sitting and talking to each other, just breaking bread. And people often approach me and they say, I want to start a Kids for Peace in another city in Israel-Palestine, not in Jerusalem. And I say, great, find 2 parents that are going to commit to this and are going to deal with all of the obstacles. And as soon as you have just 2 parents that want to make this happen, they'll bring kids and they'll bring people that want to make this happen. So I would say, you know, to all the people that don't believe in this, you just need to find a small group of people that believe in it, that want to work in it in spite of the obstacles, and work together. And then the last thing I would say that, and I respect obviously the anti-normalization groups as a form of resistance, and I understand why that's very important for Palestinians. I would also say though, if you want to show people that there's another way, that it's not just either sort of the Hasbara way of Israel can do no wrong, or the BDS way of Palestine can do no wrong, then support civil society, whether it's through the Alliance for Middle East Peace or the New Israel Fund, or there's so many, or Peace Now, or, you know, a lot of the groups that you're hearing about tonight, there's so many groups on the ground that are doing important work to say there's an alternative between those very loud voices you hear in the media on either side, and instead of divest, invest. Invest in the people that are making the change and support them. And if it doesn't even be financial, share our social media posts, tell people we exist, show people that there's other voices other than those dominant ones that just demonize and hate and call for revenge and all of those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have actually answered the next question I was going to ask. So I would like others, tell me who wants to answer this. Someone asked here, what can we in the diaspora do to help you in Israel-Palestine? Tom, what would you say? I mean, is there something besides financial support and retweeting posts of activists that you support?
I'll tell you what, as a socialist, I always try to find a way that doesn't involve money because, sweat works just as well, if not more. The thing is, you need to keep the conversation alive. I mean, for as long as people know that the conflict exists, that it has two sides, and everyone try to tell their story with the most passion, and most of the times both stories are right. They're just colliding a little bit. And we need to focus on those collision points. And for as long as we're going to keep the conversation running, we're going to encourage people to learn facts about the occupation, about the conflict, see where the historic roots are and what the alternatives could be for the future. I think that other than supporting the organization themselves, invoking this kind of speech throughout our societies is probably the best thing we can do to ensure a safer future in this kind of interesting piece of land.
And can I maybe add to what Tom said? I think Israel cares a lot about what other countries think about it, as a democracy. And obviously the main country is the US. But if you look at sort of what I would call middle power countries like Australia, like Canada, like Germany, France, if those sorts of countries say, don't act in Sheikh Jarrah, don't demolish houses, or if they say, take initiatives for peace, try and make compromises, don't do steps that make peace further away. Israel cares about those things, and you telling your governments that you support, different strategies, whether it's through the Geneva Accord or through a confederation or a land for all. There's lots of different initiatives out there that I'm sure most of the people on this call know about. But if the Canadian government says, hey, this is something that we want to see happen, then Israel listens to that as well. And that's also something that you can do for people who are not living in Israel-Palestine.
I would like to add something for that, if it's possible.
Sure. Yes, sure, Jamal.
A big contribution will be to expand the paradigm of relation to the conflict. It's really Palestinian-Israeli conflict, but coming from pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli, it's limiting. It's limiting in a way that either I have to be on one side. We can both, Palestinians and Israelis, Jews, be on one side, stand for equal relation, dignity to other. And this is what we stand to. So if we can relate to that, including relationship to the Palestinian Authority, who no more is representing me because their practices are not respecting what I believe in. So this is something that I invite all of us to see us not just as national identity or Jew or Palestinian or pro or against. So we are together. We should be very intentional about what we stand for. I hope that was clear.
This was just such a absolutely fantastic panel. And just to let everybody know, my name is Michael Morgenthau, and I'm a JSpaceCanada board member. As we wrap up our symposium, I want to thank Judy Maltz for facilitating another eye-opening and meaningful discussion, and thank each of our panelists for sharing their perspective and for the work that you are all doing to forge a path towards peace and human rights in Israel and Palestine. As you probably already know, this program is only part one of JSpace's 10th anniversary celebration. If you are a member, please join us at 4 p.m. this afternoon for our annual general meeting. It's really important that you're there if you are a member. And tonight at 7:30 p.m., we hope to see you all back here for our tribute gala, honoring our outgoing president, Dr. Karen Mock, and our other outgoing board members. Join us as we celebrate JSpace's accomplishments over the last decade and optimistically look into our future. This is such an exciting time for our organization. After 10 years of hard work, this year promises to be an opportunity for renewal and growth. We are ready to work with you to build the progressive Jewish community of our dreams here in Canada. Stay tuned, big things are happening and you won't want to miss it.